It has been ages since I updated you on my authentic ex-Tokyo Taxi Nissan Cedric project car. If you've never seen the Honourable Jonny cab before, then click the link above now to watch the first episode. Otherwise, keep watching to see how in this episode we fit adjustable air ride suspension in order to make the car do a bit of this, do a bit of that, all at the touch of a button or the tap of a phone, but without compromising that glorious floaty ride quality. I'm Jonny Smith, this is The Late Break Show.
A lot of cars have off-the-shelf products. So if you take a Volkswagen or a BMW or anything along those lines, most of those cars will have an off-the-shelf option. So if you can buy, say, a coilover setup for a car, you can probably buy an air ride setup for a car. That's the easiest way to imagine it. This being what it is, there's no suspension available for this car at all. Certainly nothing off the shelf anyway, let's put it that way. So the initial visit when you came a couple of months ago was to see what the suspension setup was like. We found the car had fixed front hubs, for example. So they're a one-piece, well, we'll go into that later, but they're a one-piece front hub. So it's not like a McPherson style strut where you can just undo 2 bolts, take the strut off and put a new strut on. This is all welded together, it's all fixed. So we have to address that situation. And same on the rear, because it's a rear wheel drive car and it's got an axle in the back. Again, it has a separate spring like a lot of cars, but you've got to allow for axle articulation. So we need to see where we can fit things, how we can fit things, how much lift we're going to get, how much drop we're going to get, what sort of size bags we can get in, that kind of thing. I say, because it's not off the shelf, you have to end up fabricating everything. So you need to do some initial measurements to find out what's going to fit, what's going to work.
The main components on an air ride suspension kit are an air tank to hold the air, an air compressor to push that air into the tank, a manifold block to distribute the air to each corner of the car, and airbags which go in place of the springs on each corner of the car. And then you've got air lines, of course, which deliver all of that compressed air to the airbags. Okay, so that is the Cedric front corner with no suspension on it at all. It's bare. And I'm guessing, Phil, the front suspension is the most technical part.
Yeah, from a fabrication point of view, a lot more fabrication in the front than the back.
Yeah.
And that's, as we'll chat about now, is because of the fact it's a fixed strut. So it's not a bolt-on, bolt-off option in terms of the hub. So the hub assembly on this, so the part where the wheel bearing is and the brake rotor and the caliper would mount, is part of the strut. It's one piece. From the fact, as I say, there's a little bit of footage actually which I shot, which will explain the breakdown of how it's built up. But to give you a brief overview, it's a fixed body strut, and then it has an inserted damper in it that's oil filled and gives you your damping. But when you remove the strut, you can take that damper out separately, and you still end up with a strut body that is sort of 15 inches long. So coming off that, it's one piece, and it's yay long. Then you have your spring plate and your spring. As I say, there's a bit of footage which explains that better. So that is actually one piece, all welded together from the factory. The actual shock absorber is built into this. So the sleeve goes in there. This tube is oil filled, and that gives the damping. This is the original shock once it's removed from the vehicle, and it has a big seal at the top, which keeps the oil contained and gives the vehicle its damping. And this is a tube. This is the airlift strut that we want to fit. This is a threaded body unit, so this is completely threaded with the airbag already attached to it. So what we're going to do is we would chop this unit off to give us a lower section for the hub here. That'll give us, we just basically want that section there, so that'll give us that section. So what we end up with when it's cut down is this. This is the hub chopped. We then machine up 2 small inserts. They get pressed into there. The reason for this is to make sure that we can securely fit the new threaded body section that was with the airlift strut. So that will then slide onto there, and that gives us the ability to seam weld around there and make it structurally tight and a good fit. So there's obviously it's completely safe to use. And then what will happen is this section is threaded, and obviously that is threaded body, and that will thread into there. What will then that mean is we can then adjust the length of the damper to suit the vehicle. So we can tailor our aired out points exactly to suit the wheels and the car and clearances and so on.
So the bag sits right at the top of the strut.
Yes, so it replaces, it's effectively in the same place as the spring, and it replaces the spring. As I say, on a normal car, a McPherson style car or whatever, that would be just a one unit, you know, like a replacement damper or replacement coilover unit that you just take one off and bolt one on. Quite straightforward. The difference with this is, like I say, we have to fabricate to enable us to still have it as a one-piece unit. We can't make this a two-piece unit, it's not possible, so it has to be welded together.
Okay.
So then we end up with our bag, where the spring will be, and then we end up with the top mount as well. And again, on this one, because it's not off the shelf, we've also had to fabricate these top mounts. So if I just spin this round for you, we can see the top mount section. So
oh yes,
this is a plate we machine up that then fits the car. So this is drilled and tapped for the bolt holes to match the original top mount in the car, so it'll physically bolt into the strut tower. By utilising these airlift struts, what we actually also end up with is a camber adjustable strut. So from a geometry point of view, it also actually enables us to set the car up a lot better. So again, normally as you lower a car, all of these things change. Camber changes, caster changes, they all change because, you know, the suspension's 5 or 6 inches lower than it was.
Yeah.
Not all struts are this camber adjustable, but a lot of airlift struts are, which is great. And we try to utilise it where we can. So this one now has ended up being camber adjustable. So what it does is when we're running the car, like I say, 4 or 5 inches lower than a stock car would have been ran, to, you know, reduce tyre wear and that kind of thing, we can set the car up, get the geometry correct, adjust the camber, adjust the caster, and so on. The other thing with them being threaded body is we can also vary how high the car airs out. So you can lengthen and shorten the strut to suit. So this is a completely threaded tube, and that's a completely threaded shock body. So we can tailor.
You've got loads of adjustability.
Yeah, we can tailor the aired out point of the car perfectly. So we know we get, basically this bag will give 4.5 inches of lift.
Okay.
Maximum. So we aim to get it so your ride height is at 2 inches effectively. So you're at the 50% point of travel. So that's your sweet spot for damping. So you've got 50% up, 50% down. That's really where you want to be. So by having them threaded body, we can adapt that to get that ride height perfect. So not only we can adapt where it airs out, but we can also adjust as to what your ride height is and to make sure you've got good damping. So it's not too stiff and it's not too soft.
This is so much more advanced than air suspension used to be.
Oh, massively. Yeah, I mean,
like 10 years ago.
Like with anything, it's come on in leaps and bounds. 10 years ago, basically, you could get hydraulics, which felt like you were riding on a solid steel rod most of the time, or you could have a very rough airbag replacement, which is almost a bag that was welded onto the top of your original factory damper. The damping was never good enough, it wasn't stiff enough. You know, it drove okay, but they weren't comfortable, but they weren't designed for everyday cars. These days, people are much more orientated about the performance side of it. So, you know, people are bagging supercars because the damping and shocks are so much better now, it doesn't feel any different. You can put a car on air and it will drive like the car drove when you picked it up from, you know, you can get an RS4 or an RS5 or 6 or 7 or whatever, bag it, and at its ride height, it will feel no different to the day you picked it up from Audi. Amazing. But then the difference is you can park it 4 inches lower and look cool. You know, it's having that adaptability. These are also damping adjustable. So we have a little, again, I'll show you once it's on the car, but there's a little dial that fits into that top there, which is actually damping adjustable as well. So you have 30 clicks of damping adjustment. So we can stiffen the car up, or make it softer. So, I mean, they're an incredible strut to go onto the car because it gives you complete adaptability.
Can see the, from the engine bay of the Jonny cab, obviously the top mount, the strut top has all been removed, because the new one is in Phil's hand.
That's it. So yeah, we'll put the strut, obviously put the strut in. So it's like I say, it's at this point it's no different normally to sort of fitting up a regular suspension system.
Now, a lot of people have said to me, Jonny, you've got to put an RB26 Skyline drivetrain in the taxi. That's what it needs to do. Turn it into a drift car. These thoughts have crossed my mind, rest assured. But I'm not going to do that. The reason why I'm not going to do that is A, the cost of an RB26, a well-built one, is horrific. And 2, the condition of this car is just, it's so good and it's so well preserved, and it is very, very rare to have an ex-working taxi that's been well preserved. And I just don't want to rip the guts out of it. This RB20 factory fit LPG motor, honestly, it runs so nicely for the time being. I just don't want to hurt it. So please stop commenting and telling me to RB26 it, because unless you're going to give me an RB26, I'm not going to do it. The brakes are actually really keen on this car.
To be honest, there's nothing wrong with them.
Isn't there?
No, they're pretty good actually. Pads aren't bad, discs are good. So yeah, they're actually in pretty decent quality.
So then you can see the bottom of the strut that Phil's just had on the bench. You can see that adjustable collar here. And obviously the bag is there, right up there underneath the strut top that you see when you pop the bonnet. I am going to corrosion protect the Cedric because we just talked about it. It's really a solid car. It's one of the reasons why
It is.
I love it so much.
Solid actually, this one.
Okay, you can see here we've come to the other side. That braided hose there is tapping off from our point there, and let it focus. Can you see there? That is the air supply for the airbag, and obviously the compressor and the air tank live, well, they're going to live in the boot. I will now let Phil take over because this is a crucial part of air ride.
So yeah, so as you've just explained, obviously we have to have a feed to the bag. One of the things that's quite a big conversational point is airline routing. And the reason for that is quite simply quite a big safety aspect. These need to be routed safely. Very, very important. At the end of the day, this is turning. So as you're turning corners and as you're moving this front end of this vehicle around, so is the airbag turning. The airbag pivots on the top mount. So the whole airbag rotates as you turn left to right. There's an airbag connection on the back there that goes up into the back of the bag. I don't know if you'll be able to get that on camera or not, but it's sort of at the top of the bag there. But to enable that to move, you have to have a certain amount of free play in the line. So the reason we bring the braided down and put this loop in it here, so this loop on this braided line is quite simply to enable this to turn and also to go up and down. Because if the airlines are too tight, the vehicle can't, the suspension can't travel through its up and down movement. Then the next part of this, obviously we go from the braided to the nylon. So the nylon liner you get in the kit as well. This all comes in the kit as you buy one. And this is the nylon line that goes all the way down the car to the back to take the feed from the management system. Again, very important that this is securely and safely mounted. The last thing, a lot of modern cars have plastic under trays. So you can drop those plastic under trays, run your airline and then put the under tray back up again.
Is that what you do?
Yeah, so on a lot of more modern cars, that's how we'd route it. But on an older car, they don't have plastic under trays. We don't have that luxury. But again, obviously we want to make sure there's no way this can rub on anything. The road. Depends on the vehicle, normally a little bit more front to back. So the front might be running around, let's say, sort of 50 to 60 PSI in each bag. And then in the rear, you may be running sort of 30 to 40 PSI in each bag. But if you get a heavier car, they require more air, so more pressure. There's different size airlines available. This is a 1/4 inch kit. Airlift do two different versions. They do a 3/8 kit and a 1/4 inch kit. It's all Imperial because it's American, non-metric.
Yeah.
So this is a 1/4 inch kit. These don't move particularly quick, so the car doesn't sort of bounce up and down particularly fast, but the accuracy is good. So if you pick a ride height and you hit a PSI, it will hit that PSI.
So if you wanted to dance a car, let's say, like a low rider...
Yeah, you just keep going bigger and bigger and bigger. Basically, you know, 3/8 line is good for bigger cars. So on a smaller car, 1/4 inch is fine. This car doesn't weigh too much, so 1/4 inch line's fine. If you're doing like a transporter van or something like that, you know, heavier car, big old RS4 or a transporter van, you'd probably want to go up to 3/8 line because you need to move more air to lift the car, and to make that happen instantly, the bigger the line, the better.
Okay, now we're going to look at the back end of the taxi. The back end of the Cedric, you can see it now, it's all on the ramp. I'll go down and get you a good shot. You can see it's a solid axle car.
So we'll briefly touch on the rear setup on this and why, or how it is how it is. As you've just mentioned, this is a solid axle car. So this is actually 4-linked from the factory. What I mean by 4-linked is, we'll try and point them all out. So we have link bars. So this is one, body mounted that way, and then back to the axle here. So that locates the lower section of the axle effectively, and then there's also one at the top there. I don't know if you can see that, shorter one. Because we're not going from leaf spring to try and have to 4-link it, it already is. So we're going to get a great range of motion of travel on this. So if you took, like I said, if you took your average British or European car, there's a good chance it will have leaf springs. So that would be a lot more work than this is going to be.
Okay.
What it does mean though is we have a separate spring. So on the back, we have if you see it better from here, that's where the spring would have been. So you have a little spring purchase on the axle there, where the spring sits over, and there would have also been a mount at the top there, that the spring where your bump stop would have been, and then the spring would locate at the top. So you would have a separate spring and a separate monotube damper there. So it's your rear damper, rear spring. All we're basically going to do, to break it down to its simplest terms, is take the spring out and replace it with a bag.
Okay.
That's what we're doing. Obviously, we're going to change the shocks as well. These won't really be stiff enough for what we want, because we're changing the spring for a bag. Obviously, the bag is softer than a spring and does require more damping. So we're going to go for a damper that's about 30% uprated. We're going to go through a range of about 6 to 8 inches of travel on the back of this car, from aired up to aired down. During that range of travel on a panhard rod, the axle will move quite significantly left to right. So when it's all the way up, it might be over to the right, and then when it's all the way down, it might be all the way over to the left, because the panhard rod will rotate. So what we do is we make them adjustable, and what that means, we can vary the length of the panhard rod. So we can get the required ride height of the vehicle, whatever you want it to be for your daily height, and then we can set the axle exactly in the middle by being able to adjust the panhard rod. So this is what's going to replace the rear spring. Rear setups vary massively on cars, you know, independent rear suspension, fixed axle, all that kind of thing. Lots and lots of variances, so lots and lots of differences. But again, because there's not an off-the-shelf option for this, we have to fabricate a couple of little pieces. So this part here is the original top spring. I'm going to say mount, but it doesn't really mount the spring, but it's the top spring locator. So what would have normally happened is we would have had this bit of rubber here that would have sat up against that, and that would locate the spring. So the original rear spring would have just sat in that seat there, and that will locate to the top of the rear spring. That bolts up into the car. What we've done is took that, it also would have been the original bump stop actually, but we've took that and chopped that down, chopped the end of the original bump stop off, and mated it to a laser cut plate that enables us to bolt the bag on. So we can bolt through there, bolt through there to bolt the bag on, and then it gives us our air ride fitting that's there as well. So that's the top section of how we're going to hold it into the car. Obviously you need to sort of pin both top and bottom of this bag. It's not like a spring where it can just sit and have any movement. It has to be fixed. When you run in...
So airbags have to be fully anchored?
Yeah, when you run in 50, 60, 70, 80 PSI in something, if it sort of bends off to one side or anything like that, it can't do that. It has to be anchored, so that's quite important. And the reason I say that is because that then brings us into the bottom mount. Now, normally on a spring on an axle, because the spring is sort of longer than its gap, if that makes sense, so the shock would be at its max before the spring was getting anywhere near loose, there's nowhere it can go. So it doesn't actually need to be fixed, so it just normally sits on a flat perch like this. We need to actually bolt ours in, so we've had to sort of slightly modify the top of this section to give us a flat surface for our bag to sit on, and then drilled the centre to give us a centre bolt hole to bolt the bottom of the bag in. So when the bag's inflated, it can't go anywhere, the bottom of the bag can't slip anywhere, the top of the bag can't slip anywhere, it's fully tied into the car.
Okay, Phil, question. Airbags in each corner, with air lines being run to supply them with air. Where does the air come from?
Good question. This is the kind of techie bit, I suppose. This is this is what you'll interact with. So this is the point that you get to see. Once the airbags are on the car, you'll never see them again. This is the bit you get to use. So this is the management system. Lots of different management options available for these, but again, like we were talking about with the struts earlier on, about progression, these are so much more advanced than they used to be. You know, years ago there would be literally 4 switches, and you would flick that switch and it would make each corner of the car go up, and that would be that. Nowadays you have digital management systems, so they can physically control each corner of the car through a valve block. So where all the 4 air lines come into the car, we fit a valve block. That valve block controls each independent corner, but through a digital controller that's in the front of the car. To make that work, obviously we need a supply of air. So to put it super simply, we need an air tank, which is this big silver bit there. So that's the air tank, 5 gallon, contains obviously, like I say, filled by a separate compressor. It has a little water trap on this end. I mention it because it is of relevance. because you get a sort of natural build-up of moisture in these tanks.
Of course, yeah.
Obviously hot air, cold air. So they have a little water trap. The little water trap on the end there is just to feed the management with its air supply, but it sort of takes all the moisture out of the air as it feeds it.
So one of the briefs, I didn't give Phil many briefs, but one of the briefs I did want on the car was obviously as little kind of butchery as possible, and I still wanted a half decent boot space. The taxi's got a massive boot, and this is not the first tank to live in it. That one there is actually the factory fit LPG tank behind this carpet. So this tank now sits alongside that, and it's aesthetically interesting, so I don't mind it being on display. But there's still loads of space in the taxi boot. It is a deeply practical car. So that's where the compressed air lives. How does it get compressed?
Exactly, a little compressor, funnily enough. So, like you said, you didn't want it too intrusive, so we've sort of knocked up this little panel here. But behind this little panel in this corner,
that is a neat
panel. Out of the
panel.
way, is your compressor. So that is your little compressor there. That obviously just feeds the air into the tank. And that black block there is your manifold. Now, because obviously that's already mounted and you can't really see it, I've got one there to show you.
Oh, Phil, you're so pro.
I know, I think I've done this before. So this is what this actually looks like when it's not tucked down into that little recess. This is effectively your entire management. This does everything. So this is your valve block, your supply to all your bags, everything. So what you have is 6 ports on the front there. 4 of those literally feed each corner of the car. So there's a little valve above each one of those, and as you ask for air in the front of the car, open and close and allow air to pass from the tank to the bags. So your 5th port there is the one that feeds your tank into the manifold to allow the air supply to come through and out to the bags, and your last one is your exhaust, and that literally lets the air drain the other way. So you've got air going in, air coming out, and then your 4 bags. The big plug on the top, quite simply, that's just the power plug. Obviously there's a loom that connects into this, that obviously runs through to the front of the car to the battery to connect up to power this, but also power the compressor, because this also controls how and when the compressor cuts in.
Right.
The tank on average is about 150 psi's worth of air. It's about 150 psi in the tank. When it drops to a certain level, as in when you raise the car, for example, the psi's in the tank drop quite obviously, and that is when the management tells the compressor to kick in to refill the tank. So the compressor runs completely, you don't have to ask it to do anything, it runs completely independent.
Okay.
So whenever the management asks for air ride, it will tell that to cut in, that then cuts in, puts the pressure back into the tank, and it's, like I say, it's completely controlled, independent of you needing to do anything.
I know from experience there are there's oodles of different tank choices.
Yep.
How many choices are we talking about?
I dread to think. There's literally a tank for every car.
Okay.
You can get like a pancake tank, for example. They call it a pancake tank. Sits in your spare wheel well. So you take your spare wheel out, you put the pancake tank in, and it replaces that. So you lose no boot space at all. You can get sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gallon tanks. You can stack them in different ways. You can, a lot of these guys that have air ride like to have quite fancy boot installs, something to show off. And why not? You're spending a fair amount of money on this, so why not show it off?
Yeah. While Phil is putting the wheels back on it, so we can show you the suspension for the first time, going up and down, and he can do his little calibration thing. I have thought about wheels and tyres, don't get me wrong. I've had a long time to think about what wheels and tyres might work on the Jonny cab. I think I've decided. I'm down to a choice of 2. But I will wait for another episode to reveal that to you, because hopefully they're on order. The lead time is quite significant at the moment, sad face. But it won't be too long. Off the ramps now, wheels are on.
Yes. So this is your interactive bit. This is the bit you're going to use, whenever you drive it. This is the controller panel. So this is the bit that controls all the air ride. Now basically, we just made a little panel here to hold it into what was a little storage compartment. So this sort of surround of this we make just to have it safely in the car, so it's not just flying around.
It looks neat.
With the legalities of things and phones and all that kind of thing, the way these are these days and what you can and can't use on the move, we try to always integrate these so it's part of the car. So, you know, should you need to move the air ride on the move, you're not having to find a controller, pick it up, and you know, it's to hand. So it's nicely located. I've got another one, but the reason I show you this is for the reason of that's how it looks when it comes out the box. But what you will notice is your buttons are on a different orientation.
Let's have a look. Oh yeah.
The reason for that is the great thing about these airlift controllers is you can rotate the buttons. So you can actually unscrew the button pack and rotate that round and then turn the screen round to whichever orientation you want. So if you wanted to install it,
that's really well
like
thought
that
through,
way,
isn't it?
that way,
yeah,
that way, you can do all of those things. The buttons that run up the middle there are basically all of your heights. So your main airlift button is what we call the daily height. You know, the height you would drive the car around all the time.
Sort of defaults to.
Exactly. The one above it is a raised height, the one below it is a lowered height, and so on. So basically you go from highest to lowest up and down the controller.
I see.
You also have individual bag control. They're hard to see on the camera, I would imagine, but there's two little buttons. So that would be your front right airbag control. So you have three heights that you can pick from. So like sort of low, normal, and up. Then you also have your fully aired out height, which is all the way down. And then you have the option of going all the way up as well. So effectively you end up with 5, but your 3 main heights are your drive heights. So you would have your daily height, you know, for sort of general use, a lowered height for when you're, I don't know, into a show or on the motorway and you just want to cruise, you can have a lowered height. And then obviously if you go into multi-storey car parks and like that and you feel like you need a bit more lift, you have your raised heights as well.
Okay, so pressure in each bag in each corner. Overall pressure in the tank is in the top right, 147 psi, as I say.
Yeah.
And then it says Bluetooth, Phil.
Yeah, the reason for that is because these also come built in with the option to have exactly the same controllers as an app. So you can also use it on your phone.
Bloody hell, that's technology, that is.
Very cool. But also, it means you don't actually have to have the controller on show. Obviously, the numbers we have there, for example, so that rear left is at 64 psi. If I was to press that button there, we can see that drop and we're airing out. And if I then press the up button, we can pick it back up again, put some air back in it again.
Clever.
So I think it's probably time we had a look.
Phil is using his phone for this. Oh my gosh.
So that's it all the way down.
Yeah, that looks good.
And that is, well, with the smaller tyre, that chassis rail's on the floor.
Is it?
Oh yeah.
That's the first time I've seen it. Does look amazing. Oh yeah. Right, Phil, you got your phone here. You're controlling it by phone. The car is idling and you can hear the compressors just refilling the tank. So
as we said before, if we wanted to go to our daily height in inverted commas, that would be the airlift button there. So if we just press it the once, you can see the numbers come up on the screen there. That's the pressures it's going to go to, if you can make that out.
Yeah.
So if I press it once and then a quick double press of the button, and you can see the car in the background pop up. And it's literally as quick as that. In the time it took you to take the camera,
I was going to say, it's quicker than I am.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
And then to go between presets, same principle. The lower button there, for example, you see it flashing, that's just it finishing its preset. If we go to the lower one, we get the 25 on screen, we double press that, and again, that's the car going down to its lowered ride. So it's very interactive. Like I say, it's quite an intuitive system as well. Like I say, going from lowest to highest it's quite like, you know,
it's really
super
quick.
straightforward. You pick whichever, sun's come out, you know, pick whichever button you want now, and away you go. So the aired out one is slightly different. That's a press and hold. And as we said about before, that's just that little sort of inclination reminding you, are you sure you want to air out? You know, you definitely
it's like turning
want to
traction control fully off.
That's it, exactly. Do we definitely want to do this? So if we do the bottom button, again, you can see it, well, you might be able to make out, it goes to all the zeros, and then we press and hold the button one this time, and after 5 seconds, the car starts to drop. So you kind of have to be sure that you want to air out.
Yeah. Just in case you knock it on the motorway or
that's
something.
That's it, exactly. Like, you know, nothing worse could happen basically airing out at sort of 70 mile an hour. So, yeah, it's a bit more of that added security side of things.
How cool is this? How cool is this? I think, you know, I've had cars that are lowered and I've had cars that are on hydraulics, several of them, but I've actually never had an air ride vehicle. But if you're going to use it and require some level of comfort and refinement from it, I think the comparison to hydraulic and air, well, there is no comparison. Air is much more versatile. Okay, just to recap then, this is suspension all the way down, aired out. Obviously stock wheels and tyres at the moment, we'll come on to that another day. If you can go rear up, leave the front as it is. Drag stance. And then front all the way up. Brilliant. Now can you drop the bum down and leave the front as it is?
That's the advantage of the independent control. You can do anything you want. 1 corner, 3 corners.
Look at that.
Anything you like.
That was always my favourite lowrider stunts. And then like a normal, like in the middle setting, daily driver. And that's the beauty of having all this independent wheel adjustment. You can kind of pick a setting for every mood or occasion. You don't want to drive it completely aired out because theoretically it will sit on the floor. That's for show and parking purposes. Isn't it brilliant? So impressive. And engineered properly. And still with comfort. I didn't want to get rid of the Taxi's comfort because this car really does feel like you're floating around on a magic carpet. I didn't want to lose that DNA, but at the same time, I think with different wheels and tyres, being able to sit like that, big difference. Big, big difference. Hope you've enjoyed this update of my Project Taxi on the Late Brake Show. I love the way the suspension now gives me refinement if I want it, but also to be able to just air it out and drop it for show if I so wish. There will be updates soon on the wheels, tyres, audio, and also some other interior trinkets that I've got planned for the car. And there'll be some updates on my other project cars as well. Why not become a Patreon to the Late Brake Show, where for the price of a posh coffee a month, I'll give you an early sight into the videos I've got coming up, some blogs, and also some other additional details. Thanks ever so much for watching.